think peace of mind is, we'll talk first from a business standpoint, is that, you've done your best, you've done everything as ethically as possible, and you can, sleep at night and you can explain to your kids or you can explain to your mom and dad what it is you do and have faith in what you do and believe in what you do. So I think that's peace of mind from a business standpoint, from like a personal standpoint.
Welcome to the Verdict Signal podcast, where we feature how top attorneys help people make informed choices, avoid common mistakes, and move forward with confidence. Now, enjoy the show, and here's your host.
Daniel Gao here. I'm the host of Verdict Signal. And today we're expanding our conversations to the experts who protect what people build, their careers, families, and businesses. I have Matthew Fornaro, who provides practical, strategic legal guidance for businesses across South Florida. With over 20 years of experience, he helps entrepreneurs, startups, and established companies manage contracts, disputes, and risk clearly and efficiently. So Matthew, welcome and glad to have you here.
Daniel, thank you for having me. Glad to be here.
Yeah, so let's start at the very top, Matthew. How did you first get interested in the legal field?
Sure. So growing up, I liked legal stuff. I like watching The People's Court. I'm that old, back in the day with Judge Wapner.
Mhm.
I liked, just like the machinations of, dispute resolution and stuff like that. So that's kind of how I got into knowing that I wanted to be an attorney one day. And I just kind of followed through on that through college, where I was a political science major, which means I couldn't do anything but go to law school or be a politician. Then I went to law school and boom, I'm an attorney.
Okay. And what led you to focus specifically on business law?
Sure. So I have been practicing law for over 23 years. I used to work at two large Am Law 200 law firms doing commercial litigation, representing big businesses, insurance companies, and banks. And I had the opportunity more than a decade ago now to go out on my own, which I did. And I wanted to bring my skill set and focus on helping like smaller businesses, startups, and entrepreneurs who I felt were underserved by big law firms and by like local law firms out in the suburbs. So that's kind of how I got into my niche of helping small businesses, entrepreneurs, startups, and being under like the banner of business law.
Okay. And I'd imagine that the approach that, so I guess when the people come to you, if it's a big company coming to you versus kind of like your average entrepreneur, your kind of small business owner, it's a very different approach. So I guess what's one thing you wish more people understood about working with a lawyer?
Sure. For particularly for businesses at the startup phase, is that a lawyer working with a business law attorney or working with a lawyer in general is a necessity, not a luxury. And it has to be part of your business plan, hopefully before you even start your business. And a lot of people just think that they can either do it themselves or skip that step and then do it later. And they can, but it's not going to turn out well for them. And it's actually going to be more costly to go back and do the things that they should have done initially if they had an attorney by their side.
Okay. So when it comes to, I guess, the most common situations that your clients come to you for, what would you say what are those most common situations? Is it more like business formation? Is it like partnership agreements? Is it, I guess, disputes that kind of after the fact that after everything's happened and things have kind of gone in the wrong direction? Like, what's the most common situations?
It's a little bit of everything you just touched on. It just depends on where the business is in their life cycle. So if it's at the start of their life cycle, then it's, formation documents or things like that. If they're already in business, then it could be going back and actually doing the formation documents that they didn't do to begin with, or it's disputes between, members of an LLC, shareholders of a corporation, former employees, different, if they get involved in a lawsuit, contract disputes, things involving, they owe money, people owe them money, they didn't comply with the contract, someone didn't comply with one of their contracts. So it's a little bit of a mix of everything, just depending on where they are in the life cycle of their business.
Okay. Now, talking about that life cycle, you mentioned kind of in the beginning when people are first starting off, that's really kind of a good time to get a business lawyer involved in it. So I'm going to play a little bit of devil's advocate here. Let's say that someone's kind of thinking that, well, what if I just go to one of those companies that just sets up my LLC, sets up my C Corp for me. They just do like your standard boilerplate documents, but that's kind of all I need. I'm just a small business. So what would you kind of say to someone who kind of has that mindset when they're starting off their business?
Sure. Well, I'd rather they do that than do it on their own or, go on AI or go do a Google search and try to figure it out on their own. So at least they're doing that step. Ideally, you'd want to have a attorney involved because the attorney is going to know the specific subjective things that you need for your business and how, to incorporate that into not a one size fits all model, but in a, bespoke agreement or whatever you want to call it that fits your needs based on what it is you're doing now, what it is you want to do in the future, and, whatever little wrinkles or nuances versus if you go to like an online legal services provider or whatever where it's literally one size fits all. It's going to be
Mhm.
I'm in Florida, so it's going to be here's a Florida multi-member LLC agreement. The blanks have been filled in, pay your money, sign, and you're done. Versus, specific things that you want in it, which they're not able to put in it because that's not their business model. Their business model is just get you something that's legally sufficient to pass muster and doesn't necessarily fit your ideal circumstances or whatever. So better than nothing, but it would be great to have an attorney, would be the
Okay.
short answer to your question.
Got it. And are there certain situations that you would kind of recommend that people definitely get a business lawyer involved versus it's kind of like a nice to have? I'm just kind of thinking off the top of my head. I would imagine that if you're doing any type of like partnership agreement, you should probably get a business lawyer involved very, very, very early in that process before it's too late versus, hey, you can kind of go, you may not necessarily need a lawyer to do your business formation docs. If you, there's another service I can do it for you. But am I kind of right in that mindset that there are some situations where you really need to get a business lawyer involved and others where it's like maybe kind of nice to have where you should, but it's not really like necessity?
Well, ideally, you would want a business lawyer involved all the time for every situation. But I understand, you have a budget, you have time, you have, things or whatever. Definitely, if, if you need to skip over having an attorney, which I don't advocate, if you're just a sole proprietorship or a one, person operation or a solopreneur, then you're probably going to be able to get away with it a lot easier than if you have business affiliates, not necessarily partners, but people who are going to be members of an LLC with you, people who are going to be shareholders of a corporation with you, or people who are going to be partners in a partnership with you. Because then you really need an attorney because everyone should have their own attorney and the business organization itself should have an attorney as well to make sure that everyone's needs and interests are protected and everything's done correctly.
Okay. And are there other, I guess, common misconceptions people have about when they should get a business lawyer involved or just any other kind of misconceptions you've seen when clients come to you?
Sure. It's, a lot of they don't think they need it until they're either in trouble or they're successful, but they need a business law attorney, just like they need an accountant, just like they need a commercial banker, ideally before they even start their business, but definitely at the inception of their business and definitely going forward in their business.
Mhm.
And it's just, it's got to be part of your mantra of your business because you try to cut corners. You can cut corners on certain things and other things, but when it comes to the foundation of your business, particularly the documents, the business structure itself, and all those are things that you really can't cut corners on. You really can't skip over. You really can't retroactively go back and fix because it's going to be a real problem and it's going to be a real cost, particularly if you're unsuccessful and bad things happen, or if you're successful and good things happen, it's going to be way more problematic to go back and do it than it would have been to do it in the first place.
Okay. So on the topic of, I guess, making mistakes, I guess some of the biggest mistakes people can make before they would call a lawyer, someone like yourself, sounds like not getting a lawyer involved is one of them. Are there kind of other big mistakes that you see people make before they even reach out to a lawyer?
Sure, they picked the wrong business uh, organization because they just arbitrarily went on the internet and they're like, well, I'm going to be an LLC or I'm going to be a corporation or I'm going to be a partnership. And they really have no basis for why they did that other than they just read it's cool online or whatever.
Mhm.
And that's why you need to consult with not just an attorney, but also an accountant to figure out what is the best business organization for you from a legal standpoint, from a tax standpoint, from an economic standpoint. And a lot of people just arbitrarily, start off, I'm going to be an LLC. Well, okay, they're locked into the LLC. It's not impossible to change, but it would have been good if they needed to be a corporation at the onset than it is to be an LLC. So a lot of people, one of the biggest issues is that they pick the wrong business organization because they've done no due diligence and they just kind of jump into it because they read something online or, a friend of theirs told them to do something. It's not like they've got a consultation from an attorney or an accountant or even a banker to figure out, well, here's what you're doing, here's how much money you have, here's, whatever, here's what you should do for the best legal and economic and tax benefit. It's just they jump in and they do it. And, I mean, sometimes it's not a big deal. I mean, you can go back and fix it. And sometimes it really is a big deal because you have the wrong business structure, you get killed on your taxes and it affects how you're able to grow and how you're able to sell the business or bring on people or whatever. So that's usually a major issue that I see repeated often over and over is they pick the wrong business organization.
Got it. Now, you mentioned that when they're choosing that right business organization, taxes could play a big role into that. So is that something that really, because I'm thinking about taxes and then, okay, there's a business formation, which I would imagine you need a lawyer for, but then there's the taxes, which I need an accountant for. So does the business lawyer and the accountant kind of work together to advise you, or is it more the business lawyer is kind of telling you that, hey, based on where you are, you should choose this structure because the tax benefits generally are going to be better for you? Like, how do you kind of uh, toe that line between when do you need to get the accountant involved?
Well, I always like to get the accountant involved, 100% of the time because it's a holistic, global perspective, how I like to do things. And so, I know, people have monetary restrictions, like I said before, time restrictions or whatever, but one of the things you want to do a true, really good overview and preview of what it is you want to do before you do it and you implement it is to have not just the legal perspective, but the tax perspective as well, because you can do things from a different, a number of different legal perspectives. I mean, you can have an LLC, you can have an S corp, you can have a C corp, whatever. But from a tax standpoint, if you pick the wrong business organization, you're going to get killed on your taxes and you're going to have to pay a lot more taxes than if you would have picked a different organization. So that's why, as much as it's important to have the business law attorney give you the legal, the legal lowdown and give you the input from the legal side, you need the tax perspective too to figure out based on your economics or based on what it is you're doing or based on what you're selling, where you're selling, how you're doing it, how your income's going to come in. You want that all done as like a holistic overview when you pick your business organization. So I always like to work with accountants. I always like to work with bankers. I like having like a team on the side of the business owner or the entrepreneur, not just, them doing it themselves or them just having an attorney because the team works together, has the business owner's best interest in mind, and usually produces the best results for the business owner so that they can just focus on the business and the professionals worry about all the other professional stuff that the legal, the tax, the money, they take care of those issues. So then the business person can just take care of making good business decisions.
Okay. Now, I want to go back to one thing that you talked about as far as like the consequences of when things go really well or things go really bad, and they didn't get a business lawyer involved early enough in the process. I think there's a reason people don't get business attorneys involved early on. It's maybe thinking about the cost, or they just don't think about the consequences afterwards. So, could you kind of give some examples about what are some of the most common consequences you see people experience when they don't get a business lawyer involved early and things go really good for them? I'm guessing that kind of ties into taxes. You mentioned like they're doing well, they're paying more taxes than they need to. But then also, if there's anything I'm missing on the good side, but also on the bad side, like what are some things that you've seen happen on the bad side when they should have gotten a business attorney involved from the very beginning?
Sure. So no matter what their business organization is, whether it's an LLC, a partnership, or a corporation, a lot of the times they don't have the governing documents. They just, go online to their Secretary of State website, register the thing online, pay the online fee, and they're in business and they don't have the governing documents. So what happens is if you're successful, and you want to sell your business or you want to bring on investors or you want to add members to your LLC or shareholders to your corporation, you can't do it because you don't have the documents. So you have to go to what the statutes say, or, depending on where you are, the codes or whatever, Florida statutes. So you got to go with like the fallback position because you don't have documents that say what to do. And the same thing when there's a problem. If you get sued, you don't have the documents that say what happens when you get sued. You have to go to what the statutes say. And the same thing if you have a problem where, let's say, you have a problem with a fellow shareholder or a problem with a member of an LLC or a problem with your partner and you got to dissolve the company or the corporation or the partnership, or you want to kick someone out or you want to do something. Well, if you don't have the documents are the roadmap that tells the who, what, when, where, why, how about how you do everything with the business. And if you don't have it, you have to go to the fallback, which is what the law says, which are, for Florida, Florida statutes would be like for an LLC, it'd be Florida statute 605, and you're not going to like it because it's very you know harsh and very pugilistic and very costly versus if you had those documents in place that say, well, if there's a problem we do A, B, and C, versus now you have to go look up the statutes and now you really have to get an attorney involved because you're not going to have any idea what the statutes say and how to enact them or whatever. So that's a huge issue. That's an issue I see all the time, is that they don't have the documents and then things go well. They don't know how to bring on people, bring on money, sell things. Things go bad. They don't know how to wind things down. They don't know how to kick people out. They don't know how to do an accounting or anything like that.
Okay. So I guess if we would put this into a couple steps, when someone is dealing with, I kind of want to dive deeper into that area you were talking about with shareholders or partners or other people within the company, because I'm sure there's a lot of businesses like that. And I just hear a lot of horror stories of partnerships that got together and then they broke up because they couldn't get along and it just destroyed the business along with it. So we're talking specifically about either partnerships or shareholders or something along those lines. What are some of those few smart steps people can take from the very beginning to try and mitigate or hopefully avoid any issues down the line with other shareholders or partners, et cetera?
Sure. I mean, have the written governing documents that everyone agrees on. Those are what the documents are. And that's how, if an issue ever arises, that's how everything's resolved, is in those documents. And that's going to be the roadmap for how the business operates, good or bad. And that's usually how you avoid, well, not necessarily avoid a lot of problems, but deal with problems. Because when you don't have those, it's just like I said in the last segment, it's, a disaster. But then, going into the businesses, everyone understands this is what we do, this is how we do it, and then if it doesn't happen, this is what happens. That reduces a lot of questions, a lot of issues, and it brings a lot of clarity to situations with where there's a dispute with someone who you're in business with, because inevitably it could happen in any business, no matter how great your friend is, no matter how much you love your mom or whatever. If you're in business, I mean, things can happen and things can go south real quick. And that's why you have to have the documents in place to deal with it if and when it does happen.
Okay. So basically, you have your own rules of engagement. Otherwise, you're defaulting to whatever the state says.
Yeah,
Okay.
exactly.
Okay. Great way of putting it then. Okay. Now, let's say that, Matthew, that someone is looking for help from a business lawyer, but they don't know who to choose. What is the most important piece of advice you can give to this person so that they can find that lawyer that is knowledgeable, that has that's ethical, and really can get them the result they're looking for?
Sure. So you want someone who actually focuses on the practice area you're looking for. So if you want a business law attorney, you want someone who actually practices business law, who doesn't dabble in business law, who's not really like a criminal law attorney or a PI attorney or an estates and trust attorney who, oh yeah, I do business law, whatever. You want someone who solely focuses on that.
Mhm.
So I know easier said than done if you're, an outsider or a layperson or new to business to find, a credible attorney. But it comes down to the best way to get a professional on your side, or the best way to find a professional is usually, even in this day and age, is through a referral from someone who you know, who you trust, who you respect, or whatever. So the thing with doing like, a search online or whatever is that, things can be very easily manipulated. Ratings, focus areas, SEO keywords or whatever, it can all be, if you pay enough money, you can make yourself appear to be anything on the internet, for lack of a better term, right? So if you're looking for any kind of professional, whether it's an attorney, whether it's a business law attorney or another kind of attorney or an accountant or whatever, you always want to go with, if you could get a referral from someone who you know who uses that person, or at least, whatever, that's probably the best source or way to find a professional, is because they've already been vetted and vouched for by someone who is in business, or someone who you respect their judgment or whatever. So, if you have an accountant, ask the accountant who they think is a good business attorney. If you have a banker, ask the banker who they think is a good business attorney. Or if you don't have anyone, I mean, I'm assuming, most people like live in their neighborhood and do things. Ask someone who's a successful business owner, or even a regular business owner, or anything, you know, go to the restaurant, ask the manager, hey, who's your accountant, or who's your business law attorney, or go to, the store, ask, the owner, or whatever, who's your, business law attorney, ask the guy who cuts your lawn, who's your business law attorney. Do you like them? What do you think about them? And that's usually the best way to find someone, is by getting a direct referral from someone who you already know, who either uses that person, has heard of that person, or, respects that person. And that's generally the best way to find someone, even this day and age in 2026, with AI, with, internet, Google, just an old-fashioned referral of someone who's vetted is the best way to find someone.
Very good advice. Very good advice. Now, Matthew, when it comes to expectations, I think that expectations are a really big part of having a successful relationship with somebody, with a client and someone like yourself. So, how do you set the expectations so that your clients really feel informed and really supported throughout the process? I mean, there's always that joke about can't trust lawyers, but I think a lot of it comes down to the expectations that are set. So, how do you set those expectations?
Well, I think it's having like clear communication with your client from the beginning, whether it's, I mean, whether you are on Zoom right now, whether it's on Zoom, or you meet in person, or on the phone, or even by email, you find out find out specifically what it is they want, what their expectations are, first of all, let alone their expectations of you, what it is they're doing, what it is they're thinking about, where it is they want to go, that kind of thing, and then lay it out for them, tell them all about your experience, tell them all about, what it is you can do, what you've done previously in the past, check you out, do whatever. And then just be like, look, you want to start a business. Here's what you're probably going to need to do. You're going to need to have, a written business plan, hopefully, before we even start the process of getting the business. You're going to want to work with professionals like a business law attorney, an accountant, a banker, or whatever. If you're in the internet, like, someone who's into SEO or whatever. And you're going to want to then make sure you have good documents that start your business. You're going to make sure you want to have a good operating agreement or bylaws or whatever it is. And it's an entire process, and you lay out the process for them. And, you're willing to meet with them, talk with them, email, whatever, text with them, whatever it is they want to do to facilitate the relationship with them. And that, you're always going to be forthright and honest with them. You're not going to, just tell them what it is they want to hear. You're going to tell them the actual truth. And, if you want to ever discuss things or whatever, leave the door open always. And that's it. You essentially lay out the relationship of, it's a professional relationship. It should be an ongoing relationship, hopefully, because you're going to want to have an attorney throughout the course of the life of your business, not just to start your business, not just to end your business, not just when you get sued. And, you just lay it out like that. And that's generally what I do with my clients. And, I mean, it works out for the most part. I mean, obviously, there's some you can't, bang out every dent because there's always going to be something here or there that comes up or whatever. But generally, that's for the most part what you do to set their expectations.
Okay. And I'm sure education also plays a really big role in it as well. So they kind of know what to expect, they know what's going on. Now, you have quite a few videos on your website where you provide that education. I guess what kind of led you to want to create those videos on an ongoing basis?
Sure. So, one of the things I've done, particularly since COVID, because, I've been inside a lot more, not going to court as much or whatever. I wanted to create not just like the videos I put up there and like the podcasts that I've been on, but also the, like the white papers and the blogs that I put on there that all cross-reference each other to make it like actually useful and bring value to my website to prospective clients, whatever, where there's a lot of information regarding business stuff on there that they can use as a resource that isn't, crap, for lack of a better term, not to be blunt or whatever, that's actually like vetted, that's pretty true, that's not just random stuff off the internet that you don't know if it's true or not. And, to, answer questions that you may have, whatever, just go on my website and check it out. And I have so many blogs at this point. I mean, I think most general issues are pretty much covered by that or by my videos
Mhm.
because there's like, I've done more than 100 of them. They're not all up yet, but most of the stuff is on there that answers a lot of the general questions, but it's just bring value and information to, not just future clients or whatever, but just prospective clients or people in general. So it's not just a nebulous source out there. It's actual vetted source of like good information for, business owners, entrepreneurs, and startups.
Okay. So if people want to get that information, it's all there on your website. They can look through those videos and get that, and then the white papers as well.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Now, Matthew, I'm sure that throughout your experience, there must have been some memorable cases or maybe even some tough cases that you've worked on. Is there maybe one story that comes to mind that you can share and just one of those memorable or challenging cases and really how you were able to get them a successful outcome in the end?
Sure. I've been, as I said earlier, I've been an attorney 23 years. I figure, I've done the math before. I've had thousands of clients, thousands of cases, literally thousands at this point. And, so many, I don't even remember a lot of them at this point. Like I looked at some stuff from years, I'm like, I don't even remember that happening. There's a lot of stuff I remember, a lot of, most of the time, it's good stuff, sometimes not so good stuff, but there's probably, there's a few different things that stick out, not necessarily one like super victory or whatever or anything like that, but just from the transactional side, not the litigation standpoint, but from the transactional side, there's just a lot of businesses that I've been able to help over the last 10 years that are in business, that are thriving, you know, locally that are brick and mortar or even, whatever nationally because they're internet based, where, I help them get off the ground and now I can see, drive past them and see they're in business or I know they're online doing stuff. So that's always good, from the litigation standpoint when there's, lawsuits and stuff like that. I mean, there's lots of times where we've been victorious where, we've, you know, won or if we were the defendant they didn't win.
Mhm.
So there's a lot of stuff. I don't, there's not one watershed moment. There's just a lot of like great moments. I mean, I have one where the last trial that I had in Miami was a case where we represent a real estate development company that was sued by, one of their one of their investors or business affiliates, where we represented the defendants, and they wanted more than $1 million from the company, more than $1 million from the two principals of the company, and they refused to settle. We offered them money at mediation, and they were like, "No, man, we're going to trial, and we're not stopping until we get $1 million from everyone."
Mhm.
And we went to trial, and we were victorious. We actually won on everything, and we got our attorney's fees and our costs, and they got zero. So that was, that came down like last month, so that's pretty good.
Yeah.
That was a thing where, they were the people on the other side just wouldn't back down and went all the way, and we had to go all the way too. And we won, even though litigation, is there really a winner in litigation? I mean, it's a kind of metaphysical thing, but they got $0 and we got all our attorney's fees and costs paid. And again, we offered to settle the case and they didn't want to settle the case. So, things like that, I mean, like a situation like that, yeah, that makes me feel good that I was able to do that, particularly because my clients didn't do anything wrong. And, were essentially harassed for 4 years in litigation. We had to have it play out in court. So, just stuff like that over the course of 23 years
Yeah.
is, just all kinds of things like that.
Yeah, I think the small business one, I do like that part of it because I mean, I think that says a lot about kind of you, your personality when you went from kind of working for those companies, working in big businesses, and you want to help like the smaller businesses. Because
Yeah.
that's the thing is like for the smaller business owners, like it's typically like your average person who just wants to start up their own business, and no one really goes to school for entrepreneurship. I mean, now there's a little more courses, but I think most people like they didn't go to school for it, so they're just trying to figure out the best way they can. And having
Mhm.
someone like you in their corner who's able to support them, and then you get to see their thriving business, I think that's always a great win when you see that. So now, Matthew, where do you think the future of business law is going? Kind of more particularly in should people kind of pay attention to anything in particular for their businesses?
Obviously, technology is probably the biggest driving force behind business, and it's going to change a lot of things. I mean, AI is huge, probably the biggest technology thing ever to hit business.
Mhm.
And it's just how AI plays out in your business. I mean, for my business, from a legal standpoint, I use AI from my legal practice, but I use it, from a highly like ethical standpoint where I'm in charge of the AI. I just don't blindly use it or do whatever. I make sure I quality check it and fact check it and do everything. So that, I use AI in the actual business part of my business, which is huge. It's been a huge time and money saver. So I think, for every small business or not even small business, just any business or any entrepreneur, any startup, I think the integration of technology more and more into their business, no matter what it is their business is, it's going to get touched by technology. It's going to get touched by AI. And it's just figuring out what's good and what's not good and what's, useful and what's crap. And, it's just, there's so much out there. It's hard to figure out what's good for your business or what's useful for your business. And I think that's what a major issue that a lot of business owners have to face now is what there's so much technology out there that obviously you can't ignore it. You have to implement it, but figuring out what's right and what's not is probably what a major issue that every business is facing right now is going to be facing more and more as time goes on.
Got it. And with the future in mind, I want to talk about your practice. What's your vision for your practice?
I just keep getting more and more efficient in implementing more and more technology, and I'm able to help more and more people and do more and more stuff than I was, when I started 10 years ago. And I mean, that's just what I want to do is continue to be as efficient as possible, continue to help as many people as possible, many businesses as possible, and just keep doing, good work, hopefully, and keep, doing what I've been doing, do more of it.
Mhm. Love it. Okay, well, Matthew, I have one last question for you, but before I ask it, I do want to point people to your website at fornarolegal.com. Now, last question is, what does peace of mind mean to you?
Peace of mind means a lot of different things to me. I think peace of mind is, we'll talk first from a business standpoint, is that, you've done your best, you've done everything as ethically as possible, and you can, sleep at night and you can explain to your kids or you can explain to your mom and dad what it is you do and have faith in what you do and believe in what you do. So I think that's peace of mind from a business standpoint, from like a personal standpoint. Just be the best person you can be honest and, make a difference and, be the best version of yourself that you can be, as corny as that is. I mean, just do your best and help people, and don't hold grudges, don't hold anger or anything like that, and just keep going forward and doing the best you can every day.
Okay, well, there you have it. Matthew sharing his expertise. So, Matthew, where can people contact you in your practice?
Sure. So you just pointed it out. FornaroLegal.com is the best way to get a hold of me. It's got all my goodies in there, all my stuff for all the people. It's got all my contact information. It's got all my social media. I'm all over the place. I'm not hard to miss.
Mm.
So, if you have any questions or anything, call me, email me, check out my website, check out my social media on there.
Okay, awesome. Well, Matthew, thank you for coming on the show, and thank you for sharing your expertise, and thanks for sharing your message.
All right. Thank you, Daniel. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for listening to the Verdict Signal podcast. Any questions? Please contact the practice directly with the contact information provided during the show. We'll see you again next time. Bye for now.